Well, now, at least we have some current relevant interest for this game. One of the few new MMOs to be touted for a while, and for once, not just a long-established Korean game that's finally being ported to the US, or the free-to-play conversion of a big-budget title that bit off more than it could chew. Am I being too obvious? While I did do a side quest on this a while back, it hit open beta about mid-July, so we have a lot more to work with now. Let's get to see what's in store. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Skyforge. Skyforge is a free-to-play sci-fi fantasy MMO where you embark your adventure and story upon a planet where you and others are born into this place, begin their saga to ascend to godhood. Not to be confused with the recently side-quested Sky Saga, a game where you forge weapons in worlds floating in the sky. I think someone screwed up in their naming conventions. I wish I could tell you how often I'd accidentally get these names switched when first talking about them. It's a problem that persists in Grindstone to this day. Skyforge is a joint venture between Obsidian Entertainment, an American developer known for titles like Fallout New Vegas and Knights of the Old Republic 2, a Russian developer, Allods team, and the publisher, My.com. Oh god, like Allods as in Allods Online? Yeah, this sounds like a recipe for disaster, but I can assure you that for once this isn't going to be that much of a thing. First and foremost, the game looks rather good, even on the lower settings that most of Grindstone had to play on. This really does come in stark contrast to many of the games that we've played recently, and shows that a lot of effort went into making sort of a futuristic Roman design to complement the theme of the game. This sort of effort extends to the various enemies and classes, though in an odd twist, the game only shows you several varied types of opponents, and actually makes the game just feel more samey. You'll be fighting these same exact enemies over and over again for several days with only small additions to the lineup, rather than having a slow and steady curve of new enemies to fight. Another negative with the title is that it's a rather hit-and-miss resource hog, with some of Grindstone forced to play on the lowest possible settings to get passable frame rates, even on higher-end rigs, while others were able to get away with medium settings on an older and less powerful machine. Mostly this could be due to the game's status as an open beta, and thus still needing a massive amount of work to optimize the title, though it's an issue that you should keep in mind while playing. There also seems to be a memory leak directly associated with other players, as running into a large group of players will have a detrimental effect on performance, even if you leave the zone. The game does feel very slick with its presentation, though, offering up subtle visuals to add flavor to the combat, and some rather interesting enemy designs. The animations do their best to carry on that feeling that the effects and graphics present, though they also present a bit of quirkiness, as your character will stand around like a dork if you don't complete a combo chain of attacks. It makes sense as you can choose to change your attack like in Dragon's Prophet, but it still looks like your character had a mental breakdown and just forgot what to do next. Cutscene animations are a bit odd. Strange quirks here and there, like the female NPC's breast will jiggle slightly whenever the camera cuts to them, because the game sharply resets them from their default idle animation and the jiggle physics engine has to play catch-up. Another point of amusement is the odd way the characters' mouths move when they speak. Instead of simple, subtle lip flaps, their mouths are ridiculously over-animated, moving from broad open smiles to tightly pursed lips so rapidly that it looks more like every NPC is just saying "ow wow 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 wow," and it never even remotely matches what the actor's saying. Seriously, does this look like a natural speaking pattern to you? The animation quality when seen in action is rather crisp, with some amusing little touches added in for the various classes, though as part of this game's running theme, they'll get repetitive very quickly. The music itself is alright, really nothing to complain about in its usual high fantasy sweeping orchestrations and vocal work. Basically, it's exactly what you would expect from this type of game. It's not bad, but there's nothing that really stands out that could make it for a good listen on its own. The sound work itself is actually really good. As you can tell, there was some serious effort put into it. The major issue, even though the sound design is good, is that it just gets repeated ad nauseum. This is due to combat getting dragged out longer and longer as the game progresses, meaning that you'll be listening to the same sounds of combat over and over, and they stand out just enough from everything else to be annoying. The prime example would be classes that rely on combos of their normal attacks to do special abilities, like the Necromancer, whose scythe attacks get much less sweet when you hear them for 5 full minutes. The voice work is also hit and miss within the game, as many of the characters have their voice work updated, and trust us, this is a blessing compared to the closed beta. However, many of the random enemies and minor characters have not. One of the worst examples of poor voice acting thus far has been in the Lamber Forest, where the rebels will let out a very dull and non-urgent cry of, "I don't want to die." It's a real shame that they didn't think to include the minor character voice work, but the game is still in beta stages, so hopefully this is something that can be ironed out. Thankfully, the new voice work does help immerse you into the story, even if the game tries its hardest to make sure that you won't be. Starting out, the game is a very unique take on character creation, in the fact that, at the very beginning of the game, you actually don't. Instead, as you boot up for the first time, you'll start out as a stylized and futuristic take on a Roman soldier, along with being assigned a name like Recruit 314-159-26535, and begin your journey by retelling how you were slain in battle but resurrected as a full immortal, and thus starting your path to godhood. In this mini-tutorial, you'll get a feel for the combat system and playstyle of the Paladin class, one of the 3 starter classes that you'll have, and be given a bit of the story for the game's world. The character creator is itself rather sparse, only allowing a small amount of changes to your character and body type, so don't get too excited. But if you've always wanted to make the god of completely average dads with a slight beer gut wearing a polo shirt and khakis, you have found your game. It should be noted, however, that the starting class you pick doesn't actually matter, as this game follows more modern trends of allowing you to swap between your classes on the fly, assuming you aren't in direct combat, of course. There are several classes to unlock as well, bringing the total class count up to 13 unique ones, with only a couple that feel similar in any way. Explaining how to unlock those classes will come in later, though. And trust me, given how many people ask in-game, we will explain this in detail. Combat itself is almost completely reticle-based, though you can lock onto targets to make sure you always look around to avoid traps and hazards during a fight while you're continuing to be able to attack an enemy. This system takes a bit to get used to, mostly in that you can accidentally lock onto friendly targets and then get stuck trying to switch back to enemies that are biting their ankles off while the game warns you can't attack your friendlies. The system is useful for support players, but a real pain if you're DPS. Though we should also note something odd is that there's no healers in this game, with the closest substitute being the Lightbinder, which is very small heal over time spells. The majority of healing will come from picking up health orbs that are dropped by the enemies. Even still, unlike some other big-name MMOs with rampant fanbases, they kept the boss designs and enemy types varied and mechanically complex by giving you a clear means on how to heal yourself during a fight. They also made sure to keep the roles of tanks and DPS untouched, while offering some support class styles that offer shields and buffs to mitigate damage and allowing some sort of hybridized trinity. During each encounter, you can plan ahead for what you'll be facing based on the icon above the enemy's head. The cluster of diamonds means that they're just generic swarm monsters, and also happen to hit like freight trains later on for some reason. The dagger or short sword symbols means they're a DPS monster that can do some rather pitiful damage unless they're charging up their major sniper-like attacks that must be avoided or shielded. The triangle with the eye in the middle are designated as support and clearly part of the Illuminati, often tending to buff nearby mobs or summon additional mobs and put up damage shields. Finally, the shield-adorned enemies are very tanky compared to the others, but could possess a lot of crowd control abilities and hit for a surprisingly large amount of damage. Once you have the basics of action reticle combat down, it's time to understand what these quest rewards are actually giving you. Finishing a quest or a series of quests doesn't necessarily grant you experience, and instead will give you access to what are known as sparks of insight, which are used in your class's skill tree. Each node along the tree is designated by a color of red, green, or blue, and requires set amounts in order to unlock them with higher costs the further along the tree you get. Progressing down the skill tree, you'll eventually unlock the Path of the X, with X being your certain class, and unlocking the ability to earn class-specific sparks that are used to progress further down the skill tree. At the same time, you'll unlock the Ascension Atlas, which will give you the first of many surprises in the game, when this Path of Exile-like skill web unfolds before you. This is where you get to unlock alternate classes for your usage, though the method to do so is a grind to say the least, requiring you to unlock the path all the way to the next class from a class that you've already have unlocked, before you can purchase the class itself, using Sparks of Transformation. The Ascension Atlas itself uses the exact same Sparks of Insight that you used earlier for progressing down your class tree, only now with the required amounts being in the several hundreds. So the Atlas is, in essence, one long and tedious grind, but it gets better, if you equate better with more tedious. You can unlock another atlas known as the Godform Atlas, which will then branch into 6 other trees before you can get to a future planned Elder God Atlas. What makes this more frustrating is the weekly cap set on sparks and credits, ensuring that you can't think of unlocking new classes in terms of repeated dungeon runs, but rather weeks, which will just add to that numbing sensation. Compounding this issue is the fact that individual fights begin to take longer and longer to complete as you near 5,000 prestige, ensuring that the game will hit a full-on grind wall and making the open-world zones far more tiresome. Let's tack on the fact that you'll be given achievement-like quests to complete from Flavius in order to unlock talent slots for all your various classes. This actually has a negative impact on the game, but we'll mention that in Community, as it'll become clear as to why. As it stands, you can expect to see quests like kill 200 enemies as a Lightbinder or Paladin, dash 50 times in combat, collect 50 healing orbs, and it's yet more tedious time wasting adding onto the game. This holds true simply because the more powerful you technically become, the weaker you end up feeling as you progress through the game. Progress in gaining upgrades in the Atlas will feel slower. Gaining the amount of sparks you need to progress through the Atlas will feel slower. Combat will feel slower as the enemies exponentially increase their health in some ridiculous difficulty spikes. Gain more, grind more. It's like an MMO version of Cookie Clicker. That comparison doesn't exactly diminish as time goes on either. The largest example of being a Facebook-style game within the game will open at 2,000 prestige. This game will focus on running your own religious order of devotees and worshippers who perform missions and gather resources for you. This isn't as interesting as it sounds, as it's yet more grinding on the side to get your order higher in rank to give you slight buffs to your character. Each mission really boils down to select appropriate character, then wait for the timer to end. Amusingly, the developers have questioned why people stop playing Skyforge when they hit their weekly cap, since there is this totally interesting minigame to play since you can't progress normally. It is rather amusing to see the developers so baffled by the community on this point, as it's pretty much a unanimous notion that Grindstone does not enjoy the weekly limits, and with a game with this much grind it just feels like a major handicap towards your progress. Let's just see if the community can help alleviate this. We'll just come right out and say it. The community leaves a lot to be desired. Now, you can of course find some good people out in the game world, but they will be drowned out by the sheer volume of horrible racist chat comments, stupid shouting matches about why the game isn't as good as their favorite game, and just general statements that hurt your faith in humanity. Our greatest hope is that simply the usual game hoppers and attention seekers will just leave the game for the next flavor of the month, as this is the usual chat quality standard of launch title MMOs for a while. It remains to be seen if this is the community that will stick out the absurd grind. Fortunately, you can turn off the global chat to help your sanity, but to do so is a bit counter to what you would expect. What you need to do is open any of your inventory or equipment tabs and close the global tab on the bottom of the screen, which displays all chat channels currently open. This is such a weird placement for this system, but at least there's a quick way to brighten up the day, and how grindy the game is, saving your sanity for the actual busy work and not the chat certainly helps enjoyment. Speaking of, we highly recommend finding some other people to play the game with. There's a decent party system in the game, but it too has its quirks. For example, inviting someone to a party can oftentimes fail regardless of how many numbers of invites have been sent, but assuming you get a party, you still need to be aware that kill credit is not shared, but objective credit is for interactable objects. If you say want to help your friend get through the early grind and up to where you are, you'll have to have them initiate all the combat and get damage in on each mob, or they'll simply get nothing out of the engagement. This is where the community has an opportunity to be terrible, as people will sweep in massacring all enemies before you can get a hit in and earn credit for it, though sadly the game mostly encourages this because of the aforementioned talent systems. See, those paladins, cryomancers, lightbinders, and whatever else aren't coming down to the low-tier areas just to ruin your leveling experience. It just makes the most logical sense to one-shot all your enemies so you can blaze through these kill 200 enemy quests that you need to complete for talents. This usually means that the low-tier open-world zones can be borderline unplayable for a time, as high-level players will rush around slaughtering everything that they can in order to get these annoying quests done, so that they can continue playing the game as well. It's a flawed system to say the least. Now, where parties really shine is helping each other tackle the monumental dungeon grinding, easing the tedium of constantly repeating the same dungeons over and over again, and speeding up the pace, allowing you to more easily overcome some of the early grinding hurdles. Having a couple friends help alleviate some of the more obtuse boss mechanics as well. A particular cube that requires cannon fire to bring down instantly springs to mind. This extends to the open world areas, which feel more like your traditional MMO with quests, though they are usually given to you via proximity and waypoints that you can teleport between. A major issue is that questing in these zones follows very formulaic designs: kill X, gather Y, talk to Z, so on. These zones also tend to outstay their welcome very quickly, especially from Lambra Forest onwards, where the zones gets much larger, and there are far more quests to complete to get a full clear and the best rewards. These zones also intensify that FYGM attitude of the community, and it's not helped that these areas have the worst system performance within the game. There's a PvP system as well, allowing for bouts of free-for-all, 3v3, and 10v10. Players have noticed that your performance within the PvP may depend far more on your class. Some Grindstone members noted that playing as a Lightbinder with the right combination of skills and talents could render you borderline invincible and causing enemies damage to themselves far worse than they could you. And Dresker even noted an extremely overpowered Necromancer combo capable of causing a few million points of damage. We think they might have fixed that by now. All I know is that I spent as much time as I could as a Cryomancer, and I came in first place for both free-for-all matches that I'd played, and won the only 3v3 match I played. Granted, that was due to a severely overpowered archer on our team. As you may be wondering, there is a guild system as well, but it's tied more into the idea of having multiple gods under one banner to form a pantheon, much like the gods of many ancient cultures. The system itself works alright, with multiple clans acting as subsets of the whole, with each clan leader and officer casting votes for building projects and promotions, while at the same time all clans working together. One of the major issues, though, is that there's yet more grinding to be done on top of a pantheon that actually helps its members, usually accompanied by grinding credits to initiate building programs, which will then need resources and time donated by pantheon members to unlock more build options and etc. Really, this means only the largest pantheons will truly be worth your time, as they can easily have more buffs, and even full-on missions open to them that smaller pantheons will take far longer to unlock. So you might be wondering, with all this grind, is there something that can ease your way through the game? Well, the answer is somewhat complicated, so let's just get into that now. This is going to be a bit of a short section, as the cash shop itself is rather tiny in comparison to most standard MMOs on the market. Really, there's only a few things that can be purchased, such as costumes, a couple spark replicators that can help speed up your spark gains, premium status that also increases spark gain, though both are crippled by the restrictive weekly cap. There's mounts you can purchase by buying several temporary licenses that'll change into a permanent one, and you can gain the ability to slot stat boosting cores into the Ascension Atlas. That's where a bit of an issue comes in, as at face value, these cores are a textbook definition of pay to win, by giving you a statistical advantage that can be acquired through the cash shop currency. Fortunately, there is a way to exchange normal credits for the cash shop Ardents at a stable rate, and it helps move this down from blatant pay to win to being more of just a cash grab. But the Ardent price per core does get very steep the more you slot, making this a toss-up between dropping some cash to speed up the process or adding yet another grind to your grind. Should anything within the cash shop interest you, or the premium status feel like something you want, you can purchase Argents in quality of 2,500, 5,500, 10,500, 20,000, 40,000, and 80,000 for $2.99, $6.99, $12.99, $24.99, $49.99, and up to $99.99 respectively. Premium currency follows the idea that Wargaming and Gaijin's model has, of exchanging cash shop currency for time, rather than just paying a recurring subscription fee. Those time amounts and prices are as follows: 2,000 for 3 days, 4,000 for 7, 10,000 for 30 days, 25,000 for 90 days, and 45,000 for 180. While premium does seem to be the best bang for your buck as far as paying anything towards this game, there is a lot to spend on, and at the same time, not that much. It's kinda strange that way. It seems we've got another case of a game with great potential hitting the burnout wall pretty hard. This will depend entirely upon your personality and how you prefer to play games, but there were plenty of Grindstone members far less willing to get back into the game simply because they were at cap and felt absolutely no reason to get back into it until it reset. While there was plenty about the game to not like, I had no real problem with it. Yes, I could see what people might be getting upset over, but I didn't find the game all that difficult to just hop in and out of. Will the title really go anywhere to make its mark? That remains to be seen. Here's my final rating. There's something interesting about this kind of approach to an MMO story and concept. It's like Neverwinter meets ActRaiser, and as I said in the side quest of this video, making you an actual godlike immortal is a decent explanation as to why you have immortality and godlike powers in an MMO. Environments are also imaginative and can range from so many different places. At least you're not stuck in Fantasyland number 175. Well, not all the time, at least. If you love constantly gaining items, skills, and power, this is the game for you, since there's so many classes, each with their own skills to unlock and earn, and there's likely going to be something for you to unlock and discover for a long time. Even when you think you're nearing the end, there's something new for you to do and discover. Being able to become any class you desire, within limits, means that there won't be any reason for constant character rerolls. Not that you can exactly do that, but you get what I'm saying. If you're tired of being wrecked by the witch class, you can simply just work on becoming the witch class and see how well you fare with a skill set. No complex amount of steps or quests required. Since everything in the game hinges on the Argents currency, in a system similar to Neverwinter, the best use of those Argents would likely be a good amount of time in the premium status. It's pretty much like subscribing, but on the plus side, it helps speed along the leveling process with the increase to earn sparks. Also remember that if you're dedicated enough, you can simply earn the Argents by trading away your in-game credits. It's just a grind is all. Speaking of grind, that's this game in a nutshell. It's not a grinder in the variety of kill hundreds of enemies for one quest, previously stated exception notwithstanding, or kill a bunch of enemies to get enough experience to kill a boss kind of grinding, but it's grinding for sparks, grinding the same few dungeons for the appropriate items you need, grinding for better equipment until the game lifts yet another one of its prestige gates and lets you carry on with the story. It's working so hard to unlock a system through this grinding, only to find out it leads to a separate kind of grinding. This isn't helped by the omnipresent specter of player caps, not allowing you to even gain the very things you need to progress once reached, and it's only resetting on a weekly basis. There's a reason the community stops playing Skyforge for days at a time, my.com. All this culminates in the fact that you'll start seeing the same places all the time. Quests to send you running through Port Naori yet again are practically a meme at this point. Some locales get revisited quite often, and you'll be pretty quick to notice that enemy types don't seem to change up all that much, leaving a lot of players feeling like they're on a treadmill rather than a pathway. Even considering the beginning of the game is so basic and simple to play for as long as it is, until the game starts throwing you to more arguably unfair challenges, it might leave you burned out on the title before you even get a chance to let it shine. Next time, we're looking into the latest offering by a company with a very specific mindset. Oh god, am I still doing these? I really need to remember to write these sooner. Basics out of the way, if you want to see more of this kind of show, you can click on the window to the left to see my last episode on Echo of Soul, which is almost the exact opposite of this game on every level, except not really. Check out the video on the right to be taken to a side content first impressions video on the confusingly named Sky Saga. Yes, I did this on purpose, know my pain. No, it's nothing like Trove. My Patreon nearly succeeded at getting to the next goal, which, mind you, like most Patreon goals, are completely worthless fluff, but, you know, numbers. If you'd like to support the show, feel free to check it out and the useless perks that go along with it. Speaking of said perks, if he's still paying, I'm still saying. Slipstream has 2 places for you to check out: his semi-regular community streams over at twitch.tv/slipstreamx14, and his game development blog over at mindoftheNewbieDev.tumblr.com. We're also working on a side project we're hoping to get off the ground sometime soon. I hope for a lot of things, not the most useful life skill.